The night before, I had performed a ritual that I had done on the anniversary of 9/11 ever since I got back from Iraq in 2007. And that was a shot of bourbon for each of my 3 most dearest fallen comrades. The first shot of bourbon was Maker's Mark, and it was for Bill Wood, who loved Maker's Mark. Bill died in Dora, Iraq in 2005. The second shot of bourbon was Woodford, which is my favorite bourbon, because Joe Fenty didn't like to drink bourbon. He died on a mountaintop in Afghanistan in 2006. Joe was my dearest friend. And then my last shot of bourbon was Basil Hayden, because it's so smooth. And Freeman Gardner died so young on the streets of Amaria, Baghdad in 2007. I finished my shots and I had a couple beers and I sat and thought, and I said to myself, I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive it into the Ohio River so I can be with my dead friends in Valhalla. Of course, a policeman stopped me and put me in jail. That's the reason why I was in jail. So the next morning when I got out, I called home, and my wife answered, didn't let me say a word. She said, you're going to therapy. What she didn't say, but strongly inferred, is that you're going to go to therapy now, or you're never going to see me or your daughter again. My wife had long said that I had PTSD, that when I went to Iraq that I changed, and when I got back from Afghanistan in 2011 that I had gotten worse. Now, my wife is a PhD psychologist. She's the director of behavioral health at Fort Knox, Kentucky, in charge of all the behavioral health at Fort Knox. And so they diagnose people with PTSD. And I said, honey, what do you know, right? I said, it's perfectly normal to freak out with your back to the door because you can't see behind you. It's normal to look at every passerby to see if they have a weapon in their hand or if they're a threat. And it's normal to have your friends who had died in combat revolve through your mind in an endless cycle of despair. And it's normal to every now and then think about putting a gun to your head and pulling the trigger. Now, I did not have PTSD. I didn't believe in it. You don't go to war and serve your country and get sick. Particularly a colonel who had been in the Army at the time 28 years and had prepared his entire adult life to serve in combat. But I went to therapy because I felt that if I didn't, I knew I would lose my wife and my daughter. Now, there's 3 things that I learned whenever I was in therapy. First is that I needed it. I was on this downward spiral of self-destruction. I needed to do something. The second is that it helped. That my therapist gave me cognitive tools to help mitigate the challenges that I had, particularly with anger. And 3, that it wasn't quite enough. One day I was talking to a fellow colonel who said a derogatory comment about one of my buddies, and I went after him. I was going to beat the shit out of him. And I got pulled back and before I could do anything, and I got in trouble, bad trouble. And it looked like I was going to possibly leave the Army in dishonorable conditions. It was about that time that my psychiatrist said, hey, Fred, have you tried medication? Now, that was another red line for me. I said, I can do it myself. I'm a soldier, I'm self-disciplined. But obviously the situation I had with that colonel proved otherwise. And I was again in a now or never moment of, if I don't do something, then, I could leave the Army in a bad way. And when I first took the pills, the medication, ironically, it was just like a firefight. There is nothing that brings greater clarity than the snap of a bullet by your head and its impact 2 inches away. And that clarity is followed by the slowing down of the world so you can see it in its full spectrum. You can anticipate dangers. And then you apply your training to do your work. Well, that pill provided me the clarity and the slowing down, and the therapy gave me the tools that I needed to make the right decisions. And after a while, my buddies, I remember them only whenever I wanted to. They weren't, revolving in my head. And, shoot myself was a ridiculous notion that never entered my mind again. And then one morning, I woke up after an awesome night's sleep, and I'm laying next to my wife, and and which is something we'd never do, pillows propped up, drinking coffee. And I look over to her, and I touch her, and I say, so this is what it's like to be really normal. And she says, yes. And now I have this awesome job in this greatest city in the world, doing the thing that I love most, and that's bringing art to the people and the places that need it most. And I feel incredibly blessed, remarkably happy, and incredibly normal. And I thank God every day for that night in the Jeffersonville jail and for the cop that pulled me over. I thank God for my wife who had the courage to give me that ultimatum. And I thank God for giving me the clarity to make the right decision in my now or never moments. Thank you guys very much for listening.